Hello everyone, welcome to BraveHearts. This is Shangling. Before the streaming started, you probably see our image is a red YouTube. Why is a red YouTube? Because I'm totally pissed off today. YouTube make announcement today saying they are starting to remove from today or anytime after for any YouTube content that allege the widespread fraud in the presidential election 2020. This is like a Chinese Communist Party censorship. Because I grew up in China, this kind of announcement is like an order from the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda machine, right? Nobody can talk about Tiananmen Square anymore. Nobody can talk about the persecution of Falun Gong, or persecution of Uyghur group or Tibetan group. The government give an order, and all the media have to follow this government's order. I don't know YouTube, who's that boss, who make this order, and who's Mr. Pichai, who make this order. They need to remove any video talk about election fraud. Who gave that right? Right, I'm pissed off because I grew up in China and I immigrated to the United States to pursue freedom. How can I suffer these deprivation of my freedom again in the United States? I can't believe this. And it happened on YouTube. And this is particularly detrimental to many mainland Chinese people who jump over the firewall to come to YouTube to access information that they cannot get inside China. If YouTube damages its own reputation, no Chinese people will follow the YouTube. And many people won't visit YouTube, right? And many of the Chinese YouTube influencers, they've been talking about this election fraud extensively. And many Chinese people jump over the firewall to watch this because this is a very important platform for them to learn about democracy. Because even for these different opinions, for them, it's a unique platform. You can see different opinions. So inside China, at least it's just only one voice the government allowed. And now YouTube try to become the platform allow only one voice, right? So even Chinese people jump over the firewall, they were still living this one voice platform, just like inside of China. That's why people call the YouTube now is the red YouTube. I don't know how much connection they have with the Chinese Communist Party. And we see Mr. Pichai and went to China, all these different business trips, did they have some deals behind it? But at least right now, when you're censoring American people's voice, concerns about election fraud, you will act like a Chinese Communist Party. And I hope the Congress is not just going to have another hearing calling YouTube, Twitter's CEO to come to testify again, because they basically still lying on these hearings. I think the Congress should take stronger actions. And I'm actually happy that President Trump vetoed the NDAA and say it's too weak. If the NDA does not include the issues regarding about Article 23, Article 230, yes, Article 230, then the NDA should not be passed. Yeah, because the whole U.S. society need to take strong actions to hold these social media giants accountable, because they are censoring the information for people, for American people who pursue freedom, right? They have the right to know the frauds, the facts inside the U.S. elections. But now, the YouTube is act like the mainstream media. They are trying to censor all this information. YouTube is act like a publisher. They are sifting out all the voice they don't want. So, this is a dark day for press freedom, for freedom of expression in the United States. And YouTube make a terrible example for all the social media platforms. And we don't know if Twitter gonna follow up or any other platform will follow YouTube steps to take this action in the excuse now already past the safe harbor deadline, the December 8th. So I think many of the netizens who use YouTube will be angry about this. I want to show a couple of people's response to the YouTube. So for example, one netizen called Paul Eskender, he said, he straightforward calling YouTube fascist. And then another people call the YouTube is playing the Communist Playbook 101 called removing contents. And another statement is saying the YouTube statement is a mindless statement. And this mindless statement is breathtaking. And another YouTube saying the YouTube statement basically can translate into, quote, you will hear what she wants you to hear and you will like it, end of quote. So people definitely comparing this to, CCP censorship. CCP is propaganda because you are basically propaganda only one voice, right? You only want people to follow in Democratic Party's voice saying now, Biden is the president-elect. So that's called one voice platform. And another YouTube even make a cartoon, and you can see now, and the statement was that YouTube actually thought 1984 was a guidebook for what to do, and not a warning of what not to do. Straight to the point. And another one, simply putting Nazis propaganda chief, Gobel, and he heartily approved YouTube statement. So these definitely remind me what Senator Ted Cruz stated in the recent hearing with Twitter's CEO. Let's play the very short clip video. Can we play the very short video? So basically, Senator Ted Cruz is saying that who the hell elected you, right? To make you censor, what people want to hear.
Mr. Dorsey, who the hell elected you and put you in charge of what the media are allowed to report and what the American people are allowed to hear? And why do you persist in behaving as a... Mr. Dorsey, right, who the hell elected you and put you in charge?
Also need to be severely criticized by the Congress.
People are allowed to hear, and why do you persist in...
who love freedom, especially the freedom of expression, freedom of thought. So this definitely remind me Chinese government's operating tactics. It's called the BGY, the blue, gold, and yellow. Blue stands for the propaganda, and also disinformation campaign, as well as censorship. Because these are very important strategy. The Chinese government been playing around the world, and blue is the first thing, and they need to implement it globally. Disinformation campaign globally, make sure many of the medias globally can become Beijing's megaphone to broadcast their propagandas. And they also use disinformation campaigns, spread out all kinds of false information. Just like this year, we heard the Chinese government spokesperson saying the COVID-19, the CCP virus came from United States, came from the US military. Right? This is a typical disinformation campaign. And then censorship. And censorship, we witnessed today very clearly. This is YouTube's operation. This is censorship, right? So this is what blue stands for. And then G stands for gold. So basically, CCP using a lot of money to bribe high-ranking officers in many countries globally. And they have used it successfully, in many countries. And recently, we know one of the professors in China got famous. His name is Li Dongsheng. Right? In his recent speech, he clearly stated, in the past, CCP can take care of all the problem between the United States and China because they have someone in the top. Yes, let's quote his word. He said, because they have someone in the top. And he also had a video showing his understanding about the deep state and elite circle in the United States. And I have uploaded this video on my YouTube channel, so you can check on that. So it's clearly the CCP understand the political operation in the U.S. and they have specific target and who they want to bribe. And very clearly, they also know the key operations that need to, be corrupted so they can manifest their power of money, right? So in Professor Di Dunson's speech, he talked about when they cannot use the idea bookstore that they want to use for promoting Xi Jinping's book. They can use that connection using a Wall Street senior executive, putting pressure on the bookstore owner, and they eventually got the location to promote Xi Jinping's book, and clearly, and they emphasizing they can control Wall Street, right? So this is Professor Di Dunson, very, very bold statement. And he even said in the public meetings, he said, my strategy is using a stack of US dollars. If one stack of US dollar money doesn't work, then I use two stack of US dollar money. This kind of money strategy, and clearly bribing people. So that's the gold strategy, using gold, use money to bribe around. And of course, you know that in the UN systems, so many African countries, so many officers from different small countries, even in Europe, they are being bribed. And quite often, the CCP can waive all the debts many of the African countries owe to China. They just, waive these loans, these debts, and they don't care what Chinese people are saying about it, because that's the money that the Chinese people created, and the government just give it for free for African country, while so many Chinese people still suffer from the poverties. Right? But they use the money to bribe these African countries so they can vote for China on any issue that China want to support in the United Nations. So this is even higher levels of bribe. So this is a gold strategy. And we clearly know now, with Mr. Di Dunson's statement, the connection between Biden family and with Chinese government's connections with Chinese Communist Party's firms become more even self-evident now, right? Because we know very clearly that Hunter Biden set up his global fund with Ye Jianming, the chairman of the CFC, China Energy Corporation. And just because Hunter Biden was son of the Joe Biden, a vice president from the United States, he can quickly get 1.4 billion of investment fund to play with. And of course, he got, these shares from these companies, and they can use the dividend to pay back what they loaned. So in this way, Biden's family quickly get richer and richer, right? So this is very clearly is an operation of the gold, right? BGY, the G stands for gold. And then next one, Y is yellow. Yellow means sex. And so basically the CCP using spies to have sexual relationship with the target. The target can be business entrepreneurs, can be scholars, can be very influential academy, scholars. They all can use it for military, high-ranking general officers. Right? We know this case happened in Taiwan. High-ranking officers being fall into this trap, a sexual trap that CCP set up. And in the U.S. now, even from yesterday, the media started to pay attention another sexual scandals, and this time also involve a CCP spy, and also a high-ranking, very important politicians. Right. So in this scandal, the center of this scandal, the woman is named Christine Fan, or simply they call her Fan Fan, and she came to the United States as a student. Right, so she can have this very ideal identity, a young student, right, very active, and she can quickly become a president of the Chinese Student Scholar Association in one of the universities in Bay Area, California. And then she becomes so actively engaged in local politics. She met with local politicians from county level, city level, and then to U.S. congressman, and then this is a very important person. His name is Congressman Eric Swalwell, Congressman Eric Swalwell, and more importantly, he's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. He was a very young congressman, and somehow Nancy Pelosi picked him, and he served as a committee member in the House Intelligence Committee. This is such an important committee. You can hear many classified briefing about U.S. secret operation, right? So, this Fan had several years interaction with Congressman Swalwell, and Swalwell only got the briefing from the FBI in 2015, and then he quickly cut off the connection with Fan. But in SEO's reports, I think it didn't mention why Fan suddenly disappeared. After FBI briefed Congressman Swalwell, someone leaked information to Fan, because I think if FBI want to track down Fan, want to even catch her, they may not, just want to kick Fan out of the country. In some of the report mentioned, as an FBI strategy, sometimes they just want to kick out these spies back to China, and so that CCPs can still keep their regular pattern of using their spies. And if some of the spies were exposed too early, they change their pattern. FBI had to follow. But I think that's just one reason, one excuse. And I think the FBI also need to investigate who leaked information to Fan. How did she escape to China when right after the FBI briefed Congressman Swalwell? So these scandals, not just happening inside California, and this spy Fan also had a sexual relationship with two mayors from the Midwestern states in the U.S. So it's clearly FBI know her operations, right? And she was so active for several years. So did she develop anyone to become her downstream spies, or even collecting information and then feedback to Fan, even though she already left China? She can still receive information if she still have some contact in the U.S., right? And now, today I saw people have been able to dig out some information that this Fan still has Facebook connection with Congressman Swalwell's brother and uncle. They still have communication on the Facebook. So isn't that dangerous, right? So this is one typical example that the CCP had been using the spy network, using the sexual, you can say sexual bribery actions or sexual trap information to make people follow their orders. And there are so many allegations. Even the Vatican's has sex scandal tapes in the hands of CCP. So that's why Vatican want to have a secret deal with the Chinese government. There's so much darkness, right, in this world when you deal with sex trafficking, sex scandals. And the Chinese government has been very successful using this sex as a tool to make politicians, make entrepreneurs, make elites fall into their trap following their orders. Because once you have the video evidence in the CCP hands, they can threaten you, they can coerce you to do anything for the Chinese Communist Party. And they've been using this BGY strategy successfully. And just even in the last few days, last few months, we see so much evidence that CCP has using this BGY strategy in the US in a widespread scale. Well, that's a reality that the United States is facing, and that's a reality that CCP's threat is so imminent and existential to American people. And I want to let people know tomorrow, actually, there will be an event, a rally near the Capitol. And this is a group of people who've been victims of the Chinese communist suppression, that Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kong people, Southern Mongolian people, Falun Gong practitioners, and also for some people who was from the Stop the Steal movement. Everybody want to come together, to rally together and urge United States government to designate Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. So this is an important rally. I wish any people who watch my videos, and if you happen to be in DC area, in this metropolitan area, come to support this event. And I had the chance to interview victims from Tibet region, and his name is Tenzing Samples, and he's also a member of the board of the U.S. Tibet committees, and he talked about how Tibetan people suffer under the Chinese Communist Party. So let's watch this video. So Tenzing, first I want to ask you to talk about a very timely issue, because I just saw the news report about China is building more dams in the Tibet mountains, and even influence. So Tenzing, first I want to ask you to talk about a very timely issue, because I just saw the news report about China is building more dams in the Tibet mountains, and even influence downstream populations. So what do you think about the communist governments, all these kind of large-scale engineering, its impact into the environment in the Tibetan regions?
Yeah, well, the Tibetan plateau is the source for the water for all the the region in Asia, and we have one of the biggest the rivers came from Tibet, and China has been using this as a weapon against all the other nations, whether it's Thailand, Myanmar, India, Nepal, anywhere.
How do they use it as a weapon?
Well, they want to control the water, and then a lot of times actually divert their water to other parts of China instead of natural flow. And then in the future, there is actually threatened by the Indians, who are kind of very scared of because the water resources are going to be very critical in the next 10, 15 or in the future. So India is very critical of the Chinese controlling the dams and not having the natural flow of the water in Indian continent. So that's the one thing. And then there's Nepal. This is a very small country that Chinese controls, and they operate very heavy-handedly. And Nepal is so small, and China has huge influence economically, militarily, and I think Nepal is kind of disadvantaged. But India is kind of, sizing up with the Chinese, and they don't want to use this water source for the Chinese only, because it's about thousands of years it's been downstreaming.
Yeah, and if you change the flow paths for the rivers, and it would definitely influence the whole lifestyle for people downstream.
Yeah.
It may damage the environment badly.
Absolutely. I mean, there were, in the last 35 years, Chinese government, ever since they were controlling the water, a lot of Tibetans were forcibly relocated, and physically, and they were, if they don't want to, they will be put into prison, or their family will be, kept, separately. So there were a lot of Tibetan, nomads, and the towns and the villages were cleared out, and they were making the dams to control better, and then building dams, and that will also, when water flows naturally, so all the the vegetations, the forest, and all the environment is usually it's naturally they grow, but once they divert the water in other parts of the area, these areas affected and become a dry and
deserted. So
exactly,
right?
yeah.
Wow. So at least people can still see the situations probably in Tibet and Nepal, because foreigners can access this place. So in Tibet, many journalists in the past have been blocked by the Chinese government, right? So people didn't know exactly what happened in Tibet. Very difficult to find out the situation. So can you tell us a little bit more? What's the most current situation right now?
Well, as you said, China blocks every journalist. They don't want it because they don't want to show what's really. So, especially the journalists, the human rights, and the Tibetan Americans even not go there. I mean, regulars, you cannot take videos, they cannot expose what the Chinese projects are. If you do, the Chinese will, for the Tibetans, of course, put into prison, heavy sentences. But they are luckily not very, often, but once in a while, then, some foreigners who are environmentalists, who cares about our, water resource, and they have exposed some of the Chinese water diversions and the dam buildings and all the ecological problems that, Tibetans having. So, but they, as you said, there are not many, but, one or two who were able to sneak in. But Chinese are very conscious.
Very tightly controlled.
Yes, tightly controlled.
Yeah. So, in terms of the traditional Tibetan cultures and the people's traditional belief, so how much people can still enjoy maybe a little bit freedom to practice their own belief, or is pretty much the Chinese government forcing people to give up their own traditional belief?
Well, Tibetans have controlled ever since the Chinese took over in 1959. Tibet was independent, fully independent as a sovereign country. But 1959, the first year, 5 years, is so-called, the Tibetan as autonomous. But then the land reform started in 1965. Ever since they were divided the Tibetans into 5 different Chinese territories, like Gansu, Yunnan, Sichuan, and then Qinghai. So now the Tibetans, they don't have much to say, and they have culturally, religiously, tradition. I mean, everything is very much controlled, and Tibetans are suffering a lot in the last 61 years. And after Xi Jinping, it's getting worse. A lot of them say there is almost a second cultural revolution is happening now. There are a lot of Tibetans. They are very scared. They even don't want their families to call. Let's say 10 years ago you were able to make a phone call. Yeah. Now they don't want you to call.
Because heavily surveillance or monitored on the phone?
They have all the technologies, you are listening all the time, your videos, like a WeChat or like TikToks, when you talk, you will be,
get traced, you can monitor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So people they are very scared, and it's a very critical time for the Tibetans. And before, when the Tibetans, they usually go for it's what we call a circumambulance, which is usually they use that you have temple or monastery, and then they will make a holy walk. And before, you can go on the holy walk without much problem. But
it's
now,
a very important religious ceremony.
Exactly.
You have to do it.
It's kind of ritual, and the more you make the circle, holy walk, which both Hindu and Hinduism, Hindus and Buddhism they do, they will make it so increase your merits. So what happened is before you can make these holy walks around any important religious artifacts, you don't have to swipe your national ID card.
I see.
But now, when you go that, you have to swipe the ID card, which means Chinese government getting all the information.
Yeah, they track you down.
They track you down. And then if you are, Chinese government employees or working, you will be punished because you have, these Tibetan ideas or religious ideas. I mean, it's a horrible situation right now.
So how
it's getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah, getting tighter. And you mentioned it's almost like a second cultural revolution. I just only read a little bit news like Xi Jinping maybe even forcing Tibetan to take down Dalai Lama's picture and put Xi Jinping's photo on it. Well, yeah, it's almost exactly like a cultural revolution time.
It is.
Yeah. So, what can international society do? I know you've been campaigning to designate CCP as a transnational criminal organization. So, do you think this will help?
Of course. Well, it should have labeled the Chinese government as a transnational criminal organization group 15, 20, 30 years ago. But our government was not, on the track or not doing their job. Thankfully, its environment under Donald Trump administration is tough for the Chinese, which you have done 30, 40 years ago. And Chinese have been, government is stealing, cheating us and doing everything. Basically, Chinese people, even the Chinese people, they don't have the right to vote. This is not a democratic, and the Chinese government took over 1949 ever since, not only in mainland China, but Tibet, in East Turkestan, in southern Mongolia. They have control. It's just a name for the autonomous. I mean, that's BS. So, what happened is the Chinese government is controlled by a group of people who have so much power, and their father, grandfather was. Yep. It's a feudalist system. Actually, the Chinese government is a feudalist system. And
the wealth is passing down.
Yeah, it's passing down. And then all they have been stealing billions of dollars. This is it's a thug. It's a thug government, and there's no Chinese people have the right to vote and say. There's no vote. There's no freedom of speech. I mean, as much as we know, it's a high time that we label this Chinese CCP, Central Chinese Communist Party, as the transnational criminal organization. I'm happy to be there, and it would be good to label them as it should be, and we should have done years ago.
And these proposal, so far, has this proposal been well received for all the Tibetan groups, like spread out globally?
Yeah. Of course, born in Tibet, and escaped from Tibet, left Tibet, 30 years ago. There were economic, development, but economic developers only benefit for the Chinese and the Chinese government. And the Tibetans are still a second-class citizen. They are not treated well, and all the, the well-to-dos are Chinese, and not a single one Tibetans are head of the company or
organization. Really?
Yes,
not even single
not
one?
A single one.
Wow.
Everybody is Chinese.
Pure suppression.
Yeah. And so this is Tibetans in Tibet. They never admitted it, Tibet as part of China. We always been a separate country, and ever since 1959 until now. And even the young people, they know what their history is, but the Chinese, of course, control. You even can't, Chinese will not allow you to have any history on Tibet. They will totally control, and everything's censored. Now, even the Dalai Lama's picture is also not allowed to carry, let alone the Tibetan independence book, and they just control everything. So anyway, but in the Tibetan community, they know the Tibetan history. So the Tibetans never want to be part of China, and they will be fighting for the Tibetan independence. But because of the situations getting tight, and they will try to not to be noticed and by persecuted for his or his family or colleagues or friends. But of course, 99% of the Tibetans, they want to be independent Tibet.
And you think the heritage of the Tibetan people can still passing down to the next generation?
Yes. The religious tradition, language have been, compromised so much. There's no religious freedom. You will see there are monasteries amongst,
where the closest,
where the monk groups, but they will see how many, monks has to be in one monastery or temple. Before the Chinese took over 1959, Tibetans kids can join the monastery when they are 6, 7 years old, or when they are 50 or 60 years old. No any limitation. But ever since the Chinese government, they will see only 100 people. Like the biggest monastery is in Lhasa. It's called the Daegu Monastery. They used to have a 10,000 monastery, but now it's less than 300. And these also scrutinized, and those Chinese government think they are not have a fault in the future. So Chinese, when the Tibetan people wants to go to the monastery, you have to pass examinations, and you cannot be part of the monastery unless you are over 18 years. And the test they are giving is giving higher and higher, so nobody will pass, and they'll say, "Well, you didn't pass the test," you know. I mean, it's ridiculous.
What a trick!
Yeah.
Did they also include some political questions in there? You have to support maybe Chairman
There
Xi.
is every week, either Thursday or Friday, depending on the monasteries. They have a public re-education, and there is a police station that will teach you and surveil all the monasteries, temple. It's there. They have been doing this for last 61 years.
Yes, you suffer so much, right? Just the outside world knows so little about it. So hopefully in the future, I think more people can help Tibetan people spread out their suffering to the global community. Let people see what Tibetan people is suffering, and people can voice out and support more on Tibetan people's situation.
Yeah, that would be great. Gladly, a lot of the Western countries are supporting, no matter how the Chinese pressure is, like United States, Canada, Europeans, Union, everybody. And we hope that Tibet will be, separated and get independent soon. So that's our hope. And in the meantime, we have to fight for all the cultural rights and the language and environment and religious practice, everything.
So it seems like one more straightforward solution, maybe just designate CCP as a TCO and then take down CCP, right? If CCP is no longer easy, you don't have pressing issues.
Yeah. We know the Chinese government so well, like Tibetans and East Uzbekistan and Southern Mongolia, because we live with them, and we understand their characters, their government policies. So we tell the Americans who are unaware of the danger of Chinese in the Western country, they will say, well, it's thousands of miles far away. It might be, but their influence in the society. We are economically linked so much. If we don't be careful and have an awareness of the Chinese, their aim and their goal, United States and the Western civilization will be in a jeopardy.
Yeah, in jeopardy right now. I mean, even for the U.S. Election, right? We know the Communist Party's influence and their money behind it now. So anyway, definitely there's a global awakening about the threat of the CCP, and I'm glad that you really engage in the campaign to label CCP as a transnational criminal organization. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Right. Thank you for joining me on today's program.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express our view. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this interview. And tomorrow, December 10th, is the World Human Rights Day. And I'm glad that I have this opportunity to share you these videos. And tomorrow I will have more interviews with different groups. Yeah, there's so many people, different ethnic groups or different religious groups, all suffer brutal suppression, oppressions, crackdowns inside China. So tomorrow is the day that we need to unite together to call what CCP really is. It's a global criminal organization. And we hope that Congressman Scott Perry's bill 8491, which called for the designation of the CCP as a transnational criminal organization, can have more momentum, can have more support throughout the nations. And if anyone watching this video, you feel this is actually a right bill to support, you can contact your congressman and urge them to contact Scott Perry's office, and I think this is a push in the right direction. And also, I want to further emphasize, since YouTube is censoring our voice, and I'm also established accounts in Rumble and also BitChute. It's also under the name of BraveHearts. So hopefully, you can also subscribe my channels in these two channels, and hopefully in the future we migrate into these platforms, or even other probably social media platform will emerge, and so we will explore different channels, and hopefully more people can still come over, subscribe our channel, and continue your support. And thank you very much That's all for today. This is Sean Lin.